Welcome to Peninsula Seniors Out and About. Today we're back at Trump National Golf Club for the 18th annual Palos Verdes Concours d'Elegance. Let's go have a look. I'm here with Vin DeBona. And what'd you bring to the Concours today?
I brought a 300 SC 1957.
I understand your wife brought something also.
She brought a 280 SC, a gold one with tobacco interior. If we're in a head-to-head battle and she wins, I think I get hamburger helper for dinner tonight, so we'll see what happens.
Well, can we have a closer-up look at your car here?
Sure, you bet. Well, here it is, the 300 SC 57, restored about 20 years ago by Chuck Brahms. And I've never met Chuck, but I understand he had an affinity for dark blue cars with light gray interior. So that's what this one is. It's pretty dark blue, and it's got a wonderful light gray interior. I've liked this car for about maybe 4 or 5 years. It was actually here at this concourse about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago that I saw the late Don Minkoff's car. What I liked so much about this car began in my early 20s. I was a film student at UCLA. James Wong Howe drove up in one of these, and he barely made it over the steering wheel. He was kind of a slight man, but one of the greatest cinematographers in our business. And I just remember that car. These are, I think, what makes these cars so attractive and so handsome. The leather is great, but look at what they did with the wood. It's just marvelous. Very unique, very special, very handcrafted. And a very charming part of driving this car is really feeling the exquisite workmanship that went into it. And I really enjoy this very much. And when you're tootling down the road, there's an awful lot of toots coming back at you, so it's kind of a fun experience. They made 200 of these cars, and this one has a sunroof. They only made 9 sunroof editions, and so I guess when we actually have a summer in Southern California, I might open the roof up and see how it works. You know, everybody wants car tips. White walls are hard to keep clean. I still use a Brillo pad, a soapy Brillo pad to clean a white wall. A lot of people go crazy about that, but you know, if you're driving to an event and it's hard to get a white wall clean, that's what I do. Now, I have a friend of mine, Mike Regalia, who is known really throughout the car industry as being one of the most top-notch, knowledgeable people about cars, a lot about Ferraris. He actually rebuilt Steve McQueen's Lusso and sold it for an astronomical price. But the engine on this car needed some work, and I'm sort of panicked because I couldn't get it all done for this concours. And he said to me last week, he said, "Get a can of scrubbing bubbles." And I took the scrubbing bubbles over to my detail guy, Fred, over at International Detail in West LA, and I said, "Scrubbing bubbles." And he looked at me like I was just out of my head. And we tried it, and he said, "Son of a gun, it really works." So we scrubbing bubbled the hell out of this car, and we'll see what the judges think today. I'll let you know tomorrow. The engine compartment is kind of a work in progress with this car. I've had the car for a year. I've done a lot of mechanical work on it. My dear friend Renee Luderon from Van Nuys Sports Cars has really helped me out with the mechanics, as has the Classic Club. But in the last concours I went to, I really hadn't opened the hood and examined it that much, and so I got dinged from the judges. Took a second place, and they said, "Clean up your engine." So that was a big awakening. So a dear friend of mine, Mike Regalia, who is very big in cars and a craftsman in paint and mechanics, said, "Try scrubbing bubbles." I said, "You're kidding." And so we scrubbing bubbled the hell out of this engine. It cleaned up pretty much everything in here. There's some clamps that may need a little bit of work here. I'm working on that. But it's getting there. I think it's probably 90% of where it should be. I want to see what the judges say today. And that's where we are. Fuel-injected engine, as everyone knows. These were, this and the 300 SLs were basically truck engines. They had a lot of truck engines left over, and if you look at the hood of a 300 SL and you see that lovely rounded bubble on the front of the hood, and you say, wow, what a great design piece that is, it's actually a necessity because they couldn't fit the engine in the car. This particular car is the third blue car I have, but a charming, charming car. I think what I often do is when people see it, I say to them, so what year do you think this car is from? And I get, 39, 41, certainly in the 40s. No one ever really thinks this car was built in 1957. So it's a surprise to everyone. And I think because of the flow of the lines and the amount of chrome, and when you compare it to what America was making at the time, more streamlined, certainly it's a very different look. And that's what I find charming about cars. I buy them not for the engines, not for the horsepower. Usually it's color and style, and those are my two guidelines. And that's what I like about cars.
I'm here with Paul Colony. Where are you from, Paul?
Pasadena.
What'd you bring to the car show today?
Two cars. The one right behind me, which is a 1960 Mercedes Cabriolet 220 SE. SE standing for the fuel-injected model.
Could we have a closer-up look of the car right next to us here?
Sure. What you're looking at is a car I've had about 2 years, and I bought it from the original owner, the family. The mother owned it. The daughter, when the mother passed away, got it, and it was restored in the mid-90s, but they didn't do a very good job, so we had to virtually take it down to the metal and do it all over again, and that includes the paintwork, the interior, the engine compartment, the engine, everything. This is a 220 SE Cabriolet. They built a little over 1,100 of them. The thing that's somewhat unique about it is that it's the fuel-injected. They made the fuel-injected models in 59 and 60. This is a 60. And as you can see, it's a two-toned dark blue and silver. Everything about the car is factory. We were very concerned that we wanted to make sure that as we restored it, every nut and bolt in the car is correct. The white walls, for example, we had to have built. It's a 2¼ inch white wall, and you just don't get those from your basic tire store anymore. The dashboard is made out of walnut. All of the components underneath the dash we had to tear out, re-chrome and reinstall. Even the bezel around the clock, which had gotten all corroded, we had to rebuild the bezel. The radio we had to have reworked. All of the knobs and latches had to be re-chromed. The upholstery was all reupholstered. All the work was done here in Southern California. The 59 and 60 Cabriolets all had this steering wheel. Prior to that, it wasn't padded. And as you'll see, the tops in these cars are very complex. There are 3 or 4 levels of material, and they're thick. The same type of structure of this top would be found in a Rolls-Royce Cabriolet. Trunk of the car has luggage in it, and it has the original tool kit with the car, and everything about the car is factory. It's a relatively very, very comfortable car to drive, very comfortable. And today it was a luxury car, actually. Even though it's not a fast car as far as pickup, once you get it on the freeway, it's can go 80, 90 miles an hour in very comfortable fashion.
Paul, you brought a second car to the Concours today. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, this is a 300 SL Gullwing. It's a 1955. They made gull wings in 54, 5, and 6, and a few in 57. They made approximately 1,400 of them, and they were the first car to actually have fuel injection. It's a mechanical fuel injection. Very, very fast for its day. Won most of the races in the early 50s that the race model entered. Outperformed Ferrari and many other cars in that era. The car was originally brought into the country. The first owner was Bill Lear, Learjet. I'm the fourth owner. We've done some work on the car, but The car, as you see right now, is probably about 90% the way it was when I got it. It had essentially 0 miles on the speedometer from the date of restoration. And I've put, in fact, coming down here today, I drove it down from Pasadena.
Wow.
And it just turned 10,000 miles. So I've driven the car quite a bit. We've driven it all over California, back and forth to Tahoe and down to Southern California.
How's it to drive?
It's a fun car to drive. You know, it's a little noisy, as you might imagine. It's really a race car more than just a passenger luxury car. It runs very, very hot inside, and for that reason, about 5 years ago, I had air conditioning put in the car, and that way I got my wife to join me. She said she wouldn't ride in it anymore if we went in hot weather and it didn't have air conditioning. So it has that. And in order to put the air conditioning in it, we had to actually build from scratch an alternator that put out 70 amps because the car's generator only put out 17 amps and wouldn't drive the air conditioning. So this car, from that standpoint, is somewhat unique. And of course, when I put the air conditioning in, not many of the gull wings, or gull wingers, as the people who own these cars are sometimes called, not many of them had air conditioning. Now we're finding air conditioning is a little more commonplace.
Can you give us a little closer up look?
The color is what is referred to as a special order color that you could at that time have Mercedes paint the car any color you wanted, even though there were about 20 standard colors. This is a special order color. It has the gray interior to match the color, which is really a dark gray with a little chocolate in it. It has a Nardi wheel. You will find these wheels that say Nardi on them. Most of them aren't real. This one is. It has luggage, as you can see. When we take trips, normally what we do is we actually take this luggage out. It's not as practical. We put soft luggage where the luggage you see is currently the air conditioning in there. We had it all matching leather so it looked like it really was from the factory. But as I said before, it was not. None of these cars had air conditioning when they were originally built. It's got a 4-speed synchromesh transmission. It's a 6-cylinder engine. The engine is actually at a slight angle. They had to do that in order to be able to accommodate the design of the car. As you can see out here by the radiator, there's something that looks like a generator, but actually it's an alternator. And it does put out 70 amps and does drive the air conditioning. This has what's referred to as a sport cam, which is a cam that can be installed in the engine, which gives you more horsepower. And the engine is a little over 200 horsepower. And in its day, people could go somewhere between 145 and 155 miles an hour. And when you think of the early 50s, that was pretty fast. So this car is a pretty quick car.
I'm here with Robin Miller, and I understand the car that you brought today has quite a history. Can you tell us a little bit about it, Robin?
Well, the car was originally commissioned by Adolf Hitler in 1940 and was to be built as a gift for the Prince of Iran. And during the course of the war, it didn't get finished in time to be delivered, so it stayed in Berlin. And I think after the war, the Russians came in, took an interest to it, and they took it home with them. And they kept it to about the mid-'80s, and we managed to buy it from a Russian general.
Wow.
And had it brought over here, and we had it restored in Santa Monica, in Hill and Vaughn, and here it is today.
Well, thank you so much for bringing it to the Concours today. Can we have a closer up look?
Absolutely. What we have here is a 1941 Mercedes, a Type 150. They built about 88 of these 770 series. Of the ones, this is the only one that they ever made as a convertible. It was, again, built as a gift from Adolf Hitler to the Prince of Iran. And it stayed in Germany till about 1945 because it didn't get it delivered to the Prince. The Russians came in, they captured it, they took it home with them. And General Lyon managed to buy it from the Russian general in 1986, I believe it was, and he brought it here. We've had it fully restored. It's not one of the armor-plated ones, which is the bulk of the 770 production. This is a non-armor-plated. It's still pretty heavy. It weighs close to 4,000 pounds. The interior has been completely refurbished in Bridge of Weir leather, dash, all the garnish moldings are burled maple and walnut. It has a capacity for 4 passengers. The rear seats do fold down to make a package tray for storage of trunks or touring. The engine on this is a 770, which is about a 7.9 liter engine. It's a big supercharged straight 8. Has a 5-speed transmission. Has a machine-turned firewall. Machine-turned, all the aluminum parts on the engine itself are all machine turns, part of the custom features that they did when they presented these cars. A lot of work went into them.
Robin, this is a dream job.
Well, undeniable. This is the finest job I've ever had. I've worked in many restoration shops, had my own shops, and to culminate in this job with General Line, it's just the best. We really get to enjoy it. We have quite a few cars that we take care of, and he completely trusts us to do what needs to be done. So we exercise them, we enjoy them, keep them up, and get to come to great events like this. You just can't beat it. I love it.
I'm here with Dave Ritter at the Concours. He's one of the representatives from the Nethercut. What'd you bring today?
Oh, I have the honor of representing the 1913 Mercedes. Beautiful car, originally coachwork built in Paris, France by La Burdette. Some of the interesting features I'd like to show you. One is these beautiful headlamps. These are acetylene headlamps known as self-generating. They carry their own carbide and water to produce the acetylene gas. To operate the headlight, you'd actually open the door and light the gas burner inside. They're very, very unusual headlights. That's an interesting feature. The deep V radiator was one of the features of the Mercedes. This is pre-Mercedes-Benz. The two didn't join until about 1926, so this is actually a Daimler-Benz. Rudge wheels. Probably the nicest feature of this car is the engine. It's a 9.6 liter 4-cylinder overhead valve. This is a very long stroke engine. It's almost a 7-inch stroke inside, over a 5-inch bore. 2 exhaust valves per cylinder, 1 intake. The overhead valve arrangement for 1913 was very rare. Uses Bosch ignition, 2 spark plugs per cylinder. It has a battery and a magneto ignition. Car uses a lot of gas. It probably gets less than 10 miles to the gallon. A very torquey engine. Under the proper conditions, it would probably do close to 100 miles an hour. And for 1913, it was considered the fastest car in the world in its day. On this side, you have the outside open exhaust. This brass mechanism you're looking at here is a dashboard control that takes hot air from around the exhaust and sends it over to the carburetor for cold weather operation. You can get a good shot of the rocker arms and push rods that operate the valves. This car also uses an exhaust cutout. This is kind of a pre-muffler, a muffler, and then a foot pedal inside the car. You can open the exhaust for extra power going up hills, and you get the real roar of that big 4-cylinder engine. It's quite nice. It's a 4-speed transmission. It has dual chain drive. Okay. The chain drive unit right here. The chain drive system was used mainly on the high horsepower cars of the day. They were just perfecting the shaft drive, and smaller engine Daimler Mercedes would use a shaft drive, but all the big engine cars, they figured it handled the horsepower a little bit better. So this has a chain drive mechanism on each side. There's actually a shaft connecting the two with inboard brakes, which is another feature. There's 2 separate brake pedals, so there's a right and a left inboard brake and an emergency brake at each wheel, so this car had outstanding brakes as well. This is the chain drive housing. You'd actually open this up to do chain adjustments and lubrication. The car has a lot of grease cups that require daily maintenance. You go around and screw down the grease cup a half a turn every day to grease all the suspension points. There's a little tank on the side here that's an interesting feature as well. It's divided in 2 sections. Half of it is filled with water, and from the dash you can adjust a drip onto the inboard brakes to cool your brakes for mountain driving. And the other half of the tank is filled with engine oil, and if you notice your oil pressure starting to drop from the dash, you can add some oil to the engine. It's a real roadworthy car. kind of see down through the hole there right next to the transaxle that there's an inboard water-cooled brake mechanism. There's one on each side. It's this mechanism in here. It's kind of hard to see, but it's got a dashboard control so you can drip extra water onto the brakes for mountain driving. Inside the car you can see the leather upholstery. The fleur-de-lis, that was all part of La Burdette's custom coachwork. Unusual pedal mechanism. In the center between the right two pedals is the throttle. You have a right brake and a left brake, a clutch pedal that controls a dual cone clutch for the high horsepower, and then the pedal on the far left is the exhaust cutout. We've got a clock, Bosch ignition, your brake drip sight glass, amperage for charging system, speedometer, sight glass for oil drip feed to the throwout bearing and steering box, and an oil drip feed for the magneto drive, engine oil pressure, fuel pressure, dashboard water pump greaser so you could add grease to the water pump as you're driving, and also the pump to start getting pressure in the fuel system. The back compartment is very luxurious. You can tell it was a different day. It has the decanters and glasses so you could enjoy your favorite beverage on the road. There's some nice wooden glove boxes and mat boxes as part of that console as well. And then off to finish off the back of the car is a large trunk. This was before trunks were incorporated as part of the coachwork, so you'd have a separate leather-covered trunk, large fuel tank, oil lamp in the rear for a tail lamp. It was right about the turn of the electrifying of the car. This car has an electric starter and a generator, but still has the gas and oil lamps. This car uses a pressurized fuel system where it actually has a pump on the engine that pressurizes the gas tank to send fuel up to the carburetor, and it uses that same pressure pump to pressurize the water and the oil reserve tanks to transfer the fluids. But this is pretty much top of the line for 1913 and a French coachwork.
Alex, it's great to see you again. And what'd you bring from the Nethercut this year?
This year at the Palos Verdes Concours d'Elegance, we brought a 1934 Austro-Daimler ADR8 Alpine sedan.
Can we have a closer-up look?
I'd love to show you. It's worth mentioning before we start actually looking at the car, to talk a little bit about the Austro-Daimler company. The company was started in right around 1899, the turn of the century, by Paul Daimler, who was Gottlieb Daimler's son, or Gottlieb Daimler, obviously one of the instrumental people with getting a motor car to actually work. Paul Daimler moved away from his father and he moved to Austria, just south of Vienna, and set up a factory which was then called Austrian Motor Works, and it became Austro-Daimler with Daimler's help. Very early on they built small capacity cars for really transportation. They built a lot of bus engines, they built engines for boats and airplanes also. Paul Daimler wanted to get in on the then growing automotive business, so he decided to start building cars. This is a much later car from 1934, and it's considered to be really the ultimate Austro-Daimler design. So if we walk around the car, we'll show you some of the features. So here we are at the front of the car, and significant here is the Austro-Daimler symbol designed by Paul Daimler, and AD Austro-Daimler and the 8 symbol. There were actually very few 8-cylinder cars built. They were mostly 6 cylinders, so they were ADR 6s. There were only 2 ADR 8s built. Both survive and both in the Nethercut collection right now. This is the only restored ADR 8 in the world right now. It's a very unique design. The designer for Austro-Daimler at the time was a gentleman named Karl Rabe, who was an understudy to Ferdinand Porsche. So this whole car was designed under Ferdinand Porsche and Karl Rabe before Porsche left Austro-Daimler to go work for Mercedes. So Karl Rabe in 1936 actually left Austro-Daimler and went to Mercedes to be Ferdinand Porsche's assistant once more, and was very instrumental in the designing of the KDF wagon, or the Volkswagen as we know it now, and in fact designed the transmission and axle setup for Volkswagens. So Karl Rabe, who was the designer of this car, went on to work for Porsche and Volkswagen and Mercedes, and also did a lot of design work for the Auto Union race cars. So this car has some very unusual features for a car of the period. It's a straight 8-cylinder engine, has a 4-speed transmission. All of the mechanical running gear is magnesium. So here's the ADR8 8-cylinder engine. As you can see, it's 8-cylinder, but it has 16 spark plugs. Carl Rabe and Ferdinand Porsche were very involved in aircraft design and considered that everything should have double redundancy on any vehicle, so everything would always work. This has a battery system, magneto system, and a dual ignition system, so you just couldn't lose spark no matter what you did. Of course, they didn't consider that you might have a carburetor problem, but that was something that they wanted to do, was to make sure the electricals were completely reliable. All the silver color you see on the engine is all magnesium. This is actually a completely dry sump engine. If anybody understands what that means, there is no oil internally in the crankcase of the engine. It's physically pumped with an oil pump through the engine. This black finned piece up here is actually the oil tank, and it's an integral cooler. The oil is contained completely in there. The only oil present in the engine is when it's being pumped by the oil pump. So it's a very unique system, adopted much later on by race car designers and prevalent in race car engineering today. It actually has an integral cooling system, which there is a rod that runs from the tank all the way up to the radiator, and the radiator has an oil cooler built into it. So all these features make it very unusual for 1934. In fact, this design came out in 1929/30, so they were very much ahead of their time. So in keeping with Austro-Daimler's theme of mechanical reliability, this was built as a touring car. Given that it has 16 spark plugs, Austro-Daimler provided spare spark plugs that are located here on the firewall. So they provided, as part of the comprehensive toolkit, 4 spare spark plugs, should you be in need of one. The chassis on this car is a tubular spine chassis. It has no frame to speak of. It has a round tube that runs the length of the car, similar to a Volkswagen, with outriggers that support the body. So what we see here is actually the end of the tubular chassis. It's behind the swing axle arrangement, and the big cover that you see that has the Austro-Daimler AD logo on it actually swings open and contains part of the toolkit and a jack for roadside repairs, and also has a little bit of storage room in there. It's actually lockable, so a lot of people would lock their valuables in that storage compartment, and who would know it was even there. Has independent rear suspension with a swing axle design by Ferdinand Porsche that later became the norm for all Volkswagen cars. All the running gear, everything underneath that needed to be, was made of lightweight magnesium to try and keep the weight of the car down. One could argue that that wasn't very successful because the car is heavy at 6,000 pounds, but the mechanical running gear was very advanced for its time. So it has 4-wheel brakes and a self-lubricating chassis. There's a pedal inside that you push from the driver's position that lubricates all the ball joints and suspension and steering. Their reliability record was really second to none back in the 30s in pre-war Germany, and part of that secret was their self-lubricating system. On the firewall is the big silver push lever there that activates the self-lubricating chassis system. It lubricates all steering and suspension joints combined with a built-in lubrication system. So you simply push on the lever once a week and everything gets greased automatically. So a fairly comprehensive instrument display, speedometer and clock and rev counter, and also kind of an unusual thing, it has oil temperature and oil pressure. Water temperature, obviously. All the various buttons and push and pull things are for mainly for working lights. Instrumentation lights are separate to the main lighting circuit. There are courtesy lights in the front and the back of the car that can be turned on and off, and dimmed. It's a 4-speed transmission, kind of unusual for 1934 to have 4 speeds. But it's very easy to drive. It's a real pleasure to drive. So this was built as a touring car, so it's actually a 4-door sedan, even though it is a fastback. Really, it was built for the rear passenger room. The front is not too big. It's comfortable, but not overly so. The car was really built for passengers, and so the rear compartment is quite spacious. There's room for luggage under the seat. Not going to be carrying too much in terms of suitcases, but there is room under the seat for storage, and there is a hatch in the back behind the rear wheel that is able to store some things. So the rear compartment of the ADR8 is much more spacious than the front, really made for wealthy people to be driven in. It's a fun car to drive, but much nicer to be driven in. A good view all around, nice view from the windows, very big windows for a car of this period. It's a full headliner, fully upholstered, and very luxurious. So from the rear view, it's probably the best view of the car. From the front, it really looks like a four-door sedan, but from the back, it's evident that it's actually quite a long, fastback design. It was supposedly aerodynamic. I don't know if they were able to test that, but certainly Ferdinand Porsche and Carl Rabe, who are the instrumental designers behind both the body and the engineering in the car, were very, very aware of aerodynamics at the time. They basically drew this car out, intending for it to be the world's best car. Austro-Daimler as a company were failing in 32 and 33. By 34, when this was built, the writing was on the wall for Austro-Daimler. The company were in financial problems. They were actually bought out by the Steyr Puch company that are now still in business producing army vehicles and military vehicles. So it is the parent company of Austro-Daimler. But at the time, Austro-Daimler were really financially in trouble, and the factory actually closed down in 1936. The ADR8 1934 Alpine sedan we have here today is considered by many to be the ultimate German car.
I'm here with Mike Coons from Mercedes Classic Center. It's good to see you, Mike. What'd you bring today?
We brought some interesting cars. These are pre-war cars that feature rear and mid-engine, so quite unique to the Mercedes-Benz brand.
We have a closer-up look.
Let's take a look. This is a 1935 130 rear-engine model. This particular car was really one of the cars that led eventually to the Volkswagen Beetle. 1.3-liter, four-cylinder, water-cooled, not an air-cooled model in this case. The engine is in the back of the car. Quite interesting. 26 horsepower, not a very fast car, but a very well-made car, very high-end within that small car segment, and very rare today to see one in this condition. There's a feature I'd like to show you. Back in the day, you didn't have blinkers yet on cars, and this car has a semaphore. So it's a little arm that just extends from the side and indicates when you want to make a turn. Has a little lamp in it, and when you're done making that turn, you move it back in. Very comfortable interior, very plush for the time. Interesting in the fact that these cars were built to the standards of almost 540Ks, so it was a rather expensive small car. Basic instrumentation. It has a 3-speed with a 4th gear fast gear. That's kind of like an overdrive. 26 horsepower, top speed about 50 miles an hour. But for the day, that was quite good actually. Suicide doors, kind of the period typical construction of doors. Series 130 was a rear engine car. So we have a small 1.3-liter flathead 4-cylinder motor, water-cooled, 26 horsepower. You can imagine with the engine this far out in the back, the handling is somewhat interesting, I would call it, but certainly enough power to move this vehicle. This particular car, they made this car in several different configurations. It was done as a sedan, as a full convertible, and what they called a cabrio sedan. So this has pretty much the benefit of a convertible that you can roll back the roof, but you also have the benefit of the rigid sidewalls, so the car's a little bit stronger, a little bit safer. So this one called a cabrio limousine in German, but limousine stands actually for sedan, means sedan. This is a 1935 150 Sport Roadster, one of 5 cars made in this configuration. It was a further development of the 130 series, but in this case, the engine is placed in the center. So this car is a very low production car. The car is technically the world's first mid-engine sports car. 55 horsepower, has a kind of a crude form of supercharging to the motor, or turbocharging rather, and very unique body style. It was built for a rally event in Germany. That was an endurance event called 2,000 kilometers through Germany. So this car, they made a total of 11 cars, but 6 of those cars were closed-bodied cars, looked very much like a Volkswagen Beetle, and 5 of the cars were open roadsters. Very unique design, central headlamp. Does not turn. A lot of people ask us if the headlamp turns. It's a fixed headlamp. And this is a car that the Mercedes-Benz Museum bought back from an owner in 1951. Sat in the museum until this year, where we resurrected the car and rebuilt the car mechanically. The car is in its original condition otherwise, but mechanically completely rebuilt by the Classic Center here in California. Features a trunk in the front. The scallop doors are kind of cool. Suicide doors once again. Top speed on this car is 77 miles per hour. The interior is actually original on this car. We left it. We didn't really want to remove the patina at all from the car. The car, as I said, hadn't run since 1951, but we recently got it running for a press event and drove around Southern California with the car. 4-speed transmission, again, with this what is called a fast fourth or a fast gear that allows you to go into an overdrive mode. Engine is in the back. In the center, in this particular case, the engine is not shared with the 130. It's unique to this car. It's a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder overhead cam. It's interesting to note that this engine in a similar form came out later in the 190 SL. So from a design perspective, it's very similar to a 1950s 190 SL. Transaxle design, very unique for Mercedes because they did not typically make cars in this kind of a configuration. So the transmission sits out in the rear with a transaxle design, axle shafts coming out of the transaxle. And as I said, this car, we took the body off this car, completely restored the drivetrain 100%, and put it back on the road. Also interesting to note is the tail of the car. It's much like a boat tail. It features 2 license plates in the back so that you could see the license plates. And the license plates, they actually are mounted to a light box. So when you turn the lights on the car, these plates completely illuminate in the rear. Very unique car. If we talk about rare cars in the Mercedes-Benz Museum collection, this is one of the rarest. So it is a priceless car. There are no other examples left. We know we made 5, but this is the only one that's around.
I'm here with Bob Greenberg, the exhibition co-chair. Good to see you again,
Good
Bob.
to see you too. We do this too many times, but I enjoy it each time.
You've got quite a turnout here.
Yeah, there are over 200 cars this year. I think the people showing up, actually being able to bring their cars at a new high. We haven't gotten hardly any no-shows. I've gotten about a half a dozen phone calls from people who said their cars wouldn't start this morning and they had a big out. But otherwise, it's been just great. And the weather is broken now, the sun is out, and it's beautiful.
I got a quick shot of Moyer.
Yeah, Paul, he's around here. He's an honorary judge this year. And he brought his Ford G50 GT, which is up at the top of the hill.
How many classes are there here?
There's a total of 24 classes this year, about 1 or 2 more than we usually have. Some of them are kind of small, but some of them are pretty big. They're good-sized classes.
So the Mercedes-Benz is one of the classes, and what are the others?
Well, Mercedes-Benz, it's German cars is the theme. Mercedes-Benz is the mark for the year, and we're standing amongst the pre-war Mercedes, which I view as the highlight of the show. But it's remarkable. I got a quick chance to go over and look at the European classics and American classics, and they're just spectacular this year. So we don't have much that we can say that isn't very, very good. I'm really pleased with it.
How does one get chosen to bring a car here?
Well, we have an exhibition committee that starts to meet. In fact, we'll have a meeting again in about a month, planning for next year. We already have a theme for next year, and we'll have an exhibition committee which has about 20 people in it. They pick a class that they want to do, and they go around to other shows, other events, and look for cars, go to museums and look for cars, go to major collectors, and they work the whole year to try to put these classes together.
I'm here with Ed and Ernie Richardson, and what did you bring to the Concours today?
We bought a 1960 220 SE Coupe.
Can we have a closer-up look?
Absolutely, that's why it's here. We purchased this car in 1993 as a retirement toy, something to keep you occupied. It was pretty poor shape, but we spent a lot of time having fun with it, and then I went to the restoration shop for the interior and the bodywork done. The interior on these cars were all leather. The dash is a solid wood dash with burl walnut veneer. It has a sunroof, which is one of the very rare things, a factory-installed steel sunroof.
I'm here with the chairman of Concours today, Peter Kunath. What's the theme today?
The theme this year is German cars, and the mark is Mercedes. And we're standing in front of one of the premier cars. It's a 1913 Mercedes, and it's not Mercedes-Benz, it's Mercedes, because Benz merged with Mercedes in 1926. So really what you're looking at here is a Mercedes, and you'll note that the star does not have a circle around it, and that's because That's what Mercedes was at the very beginning. And after they merged with Benz, then they became Mercedes-Benz with the total emblem that we all know and love these days. So,
How was the mark chosen?
well, the mark is last year we had Italian cars with Maserati being the mark, and with German cars, obviously Mercedes in the automobile industry goes back further than anybody else. Not that BMW is not a great sedan. Myself, I drive Porsches, so it's just it's the institution for German automobiles.
Well, there's a great turnout today. How many people do you expect?
I think today we'll have around probably around 4,000 to 5,000 people that will be showing up. Yesterday, we had a road rally that was sold out. We had 140 cars, and then we had Oktoberfest, which was sold out at the Edelbrock Museum, or Vic's Garage, as he likes to call it. We had some great entertainment, some great food. Sego's up on the hill, the restaurant, catered the food, and it was a great evening. It was hard to get up this morning.
Oh, this is a great event. We're going to go and see the turbine car. We don't want to miss that.
Okay, yeah, that turbine car is up on the top, and obviously Parnelli Jones is one of our honorary judges, and he was the driver of the turbine car. Another thing I should mention is Parnelli Jones yesterday drove his old boss, Andy Granatelli. Andy Granatelli is the Grand Marshal this year for us, and he was the driver in the road rally. So I got both of them together and with the wives in the back seat, and they had a lot of fun going through the peninsula on the road rally.
Well, what a memory. I'm here with Andy Granatelli, the Grand Marshal of the 18th Annual Concours d'Elegance. You're known for your racing as well as your car owner. Virtually, you've done everything that has to do with racing.
That's right. That's been around a long time. I've done it all.
Yep. Well, what do you think of this turbine car?
Well, it's my car. I had it built, and one of the greatest cars there ever was and ever will be. Still years ahead of its time. We sat in the pole that year in '68. We had first and second fastest time, and we had another car in the field, all three turbines in the field, and we led the race all but the last 7 laps, and the fuel pump went out on it. That's the way it goes.
Well, it's still in wonderful shape.
Oh, yes. Well, the car's perfect. Parnelli Jones owns the car, of course, and he does a great job keeping it up.
Is there anything you'd like to share with the viewers?
Well, I think it's a great day here today, and I think anybody who's not here should be here. It's a spectacular event, a lot of cars, a lot of people, fine exhibitions, and everything's great here. I mean, it's one of the best concours d'elegance I've ever been to anywhere. So if I were you, I'd mark your calendar for next year and be here, because it is incredible, and people are here from everywhere.
Well, congratulations for being named Grand Marshal of the Concours this year.
Thank you for having me.
I'm here with Nate from the Classic Mercedes-Benz Center. How many cars did you folks bring today?
I think we brought about 7 cars today, actually.
Wow. And what's the car we have behind us here?
Behind us is a 1886 Benz patent motor wagon, which is regarded as the world's first automobile.
Can we have a closer-up look?
Absolutely. So we have here the 1886 Benz patent motor wagon, built by Carl Benz in Mannheim, Germany in 1886, patented January of that year. And up here at the front we see the plaque that shows the patent design, and that is a patent motor wagon, and that's why we regard it as the world's first automobile. You see that it has 3 wheels instead of 4, and that was really based on the need that 4 wheels was a little bit difficult to engineer in the beginning, and so 3 wheels seemed like a more easy alternative. And we see here the tiller steering up at the front, this rack and pinion design, which allows us to turn pretty sharply. It's a very maneuverable car. You can turn within its own footprint, basically. As we come around to the back, we can see the engine in the rear, single-cylinder design. We have the cylinder right here in the very, very middle, and then this big flywheel in the back that keeps the momentum of the engine being a 1-cylinder. And this is an internal combustion engine. We have a carburetor. We have a piston, that 4-stroke system. So it is fundamentally what a car is today. It just looks a little bit different for the average person looking at it. Here we have a water tank. It is a water-cooled engine. So this tank circulates water through the engine and cools it down. There's no radiator back then. They would have had to stop every so often and fill up with water at the time. That was pretty normal back then. To start the vehicle, we simply grab this big flywheel here that turns the piston and crankshaft assembly in here, and when you spin that, you eventually get it to catch and run just the one cylinder to make it work. Runs about 700 RPM, 800 RPM is the top speed of the engine, and then with one person on a good flat level surface, you might be able to go 15 to 18 miles an hour, somewhere in there. So not the fastest car in the world, certainly, but being the world's first, it was pretty revolutionary to see back in that period. Above the engine here, we have the camshaft, which actually runs this drive belt, and this is the main power distribution for the engine. So this turns at half the speed of the engine and then transmits power via this belt to a set of differentials that's located underneath the car, and that in turn drives these two chains on the side of the chassis. And it has a full differential, which is kind of odd for back then, that you can turn each wheel independently of each other. That was pretty advanced as well. Leaf spring suspension, we see that in the back to give you a little bit of a cushioned ride, but nothing in the front. So it was a pretty rough ride on, back then they would have had just crushed rock stone paths and cobblestone streets in Europe. And that was pretty much the norm back then. So here we have the basic drive functions of the vehicle. We have a lever here, which when we move that forward, engages the drive belt that drives the wheels. And then when we push backwards, that engages the brake. So with this combined with the steering is the basic two functions that you use under normal driving. The other one is this control valve here on the dashboard, and that actually controls the air-fuel mixture going into the engine. It's very simple to drive. Usually most people can learn how to drive one of these in just a matter of an hour or so and be pretty efficient at it. There's no clutch, there's no gas pedal or anything like that, so very, very simple to use back then, considering it being a very, very early car. Earlier we discussed the 1886 Benz Patent Motor Wagon, the vehicle that was built by Karl Benz in Mannheim, Germany in 1886. This is a further evolution of his designs. This is a 1911 Benz 50 horsepower. This was a pretty standard vehicle for the company, for Benz, back in 1911. Interesting history with this car, that it was delivered to a passenger on the Titanic in April of 1912. So he took delivery of the car and then passed away about a year later. The car is an American-bodied car on a German chassis, so the bodywork that you see here was built in the United States on the 50 horsepower Benz chassis. So here we see the engine of the 1911 Benz 50 horsepower. We see two distinct jugs here that where the cylinders are. This is a 4-cylinder engine, and it might throw people off because it has 2 spark plugs per cylinder, so it looks like an 8-cylinder, but it's actually a 4. Intake manifold here, carburetor below. We also have an oil tank right here. This is the oil distribution system, so that actually feeds oil into the engine with a mechanically driven pump. This was very standard of the times in the teens and 20s for this type of engine, and water cooled, has a honeycomb radiator in the front. A little fan driven to cool the engine when it's at a standstill, but basic technology of the times. This one being a dual spark ignition system. There's 2 redundant ignition systems, so if one broke, you had a backup system available. We see a little distributor back here in the back, and a battery ignition and a magneto as well. So it's a pretty standard fare of the times. So here on the outside of the vehicle, we see these 2 levers on the side. We see the horn here. Give that a honk. Here we have the emergency brake, or one of the parking brakes, and then we have the gear shift lever. So even though you're inside the car, you still have to reach outside the car to operate the gears. You have a 4-speed transmission, a reverse, little push button there to go into reverse. And here you have a very large steering wheel control, and you also have an advance and retard for the ignition system. So this allows you to advance the ignition, retard the ignition depending on how you're driving and what fuel you're using, and then also a hand throttle. So you could set these in position and take your feet off the pedals and drive leisurely at your own pace, sort of like a modern cruise control system. So here we see the dashboard of the 1911 Benz. several pedals on the floor and not the usual configuration that we find on most modern cars. We have 3 large pedals, one of those being the clutch. That's the one in the middle. We have 2 brake pedals, one on each side, that operate 2 different types of brakes. And then the very, very small one under the steering column is the one for the gas. So back then, there wasn't a standardized system for which pedal does what, and so it was sort of every manufacturer had its own idea of what they wanted to do, and Benz was no different than that.
I'm here with Tony Vincent. It's great to see you again.
Thank you very
And
much,
you
my
brought-
dear. I'll
you-
take that traditional handshake.
And you brought another beautiful car.
Well, thank you. We're very fond of it and hope to have some real good results.
Well, the last time I saw you, you took Best in Show. So
Yes.
this is
With the 39 Delage.
Yes.
Right.
Well, can we have a closer up look?
Well, I think we should, yes. Well, we have now here at the beautiful peninsula on Palos Verdes, the 37 Mercedes. This one is a 540K Cabriolet A, supercharged, quite a rare car. And most of the work was a complete restoration in Sinklington in Devon, Germany. It took them about 4.5 years, as I recall. And then it came to an American owner before me and was restored by Scott Grunford up in San Luis Obispo. That restoration was really kind of not the nuts and bolts alone, but bringing the car back to a very high level. The restoration time that he spent was about 2.5 years. So between 2.5 and the 9 that the Germans did, was about 11.5 years of work to bring the car to the beauty that it is today. Under my ownership, we did refinements, plating, finding the things that were by the factory specs, the flag, the state flag holders, and we did a little bit of rechroming again, and there were a little bit of minor things. The car won a great award 2 years ago at Pebble Beach, Best of Class, and then the Road and Track Special Award Trophy. Another feature of the car that is quite unique, different than the well sought after 540Ks, is that it has, this particular top is a 3-position cabriolet. And that's probably is about as unique as you're going to have for the drop head. The engine with the supercharged accelerates remarkably well. We're now looking at what Richard Gallardo has just opened up the bonnet, and we have the supercharged mechanism that was designed by the German engineers. As you can see, the double exhaust here with the special pipes relieve the back pressure that any supercharger requires for high performance. And the uniqueness of this particular car, if you take a look at the air cleaner and the induction system versus the carburation, it has a very unique fuel connection to it that never allows the car to starve for fuel. Being at 1937, it's quite just a beautiful piece of art and called machinery. The dash is just magnificent. The mother of pearl around all the gauges and the instrumentation is a piece of work, that an art that you would never think of less than being beautiful. The woodwork speaks for itself. And then the gear shift is a 4-shift gear forward, and the gearbox is probably as quiet as you could ever expect for a car that has the performance capability that this Mercedes does. The back seat is for the chauffeur. I can't imagine how comfortable he'd be back there in that single seat. It's a single seat with his legs hanging to the side, and anyone that would own this car would want to drive it. Not a chauffeur, but that's what it's for. I like the cars because they're rolling art. The structure, the balance, the symmetrics of the car, just extremely outstanding. Many of the spectators have been very generous in their kindness, and they said to the car, "What makes this car special for you?" I said, "I'm very prejudiced to it because of its uniqueness, the way they styled it back in 1937, and the way it handles, and it has an elegance and yet a powerful sports car, something that in my collection is quite rare to find." The other only feature I could bring out and highlight is the way the grille speaks for the front of the vehicle, and then the back assembly on the trunk. It has an elegance that is quite hard to even beat. This 1937 540K Cabriolet is just a dear car for me. Very happy to be part of our family. And most important, it's only metal and engine, but oh, wow.
I'm here with Vic Edelbrock. I understand there was a car rally that ended up at your place last night.
Yes, there was, and what a great time we had. And they had a rally yesterday, and there was I think about 150, 60 cars. In the end, they ended up there. There was 380 people, and they had German food and German band and Oktoberfest, and it was really, really, really great. It was one of the biggest events we've had in the Vic's Garage, as we call it.
That is so cool. That is so cool. And today you brought?
We brought our 69.5 Super B. This car, through a good friend of mine, worked for Chrysler. He got us involved with making a 3-carburetor manifold. They call it a 6-pack, as you see on the hood there. And so it was the first time that we had ever made a product that goes on an actual production car. And we made 1,500 of them, which at that time it was a lot, and we were very happy with that. And so Bob Cahill was his name, and I said, Bob, I've got to buy a car. And so he said, okay, I'll order one. And I didn't do anything. He ordered it with the bucket seats and stuff like that. And I got it. And then we had it for about 7 years. And we didn't know then what we know now. I would have never sold the car in the first place, but I did.
I understand there's a story how you got it back.
Yeah. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I get this letter, and the guy says, I've got your car. And I call him, and I says, I don't think you got my car. And he says, Vic, I got your card. And on the side here it says Edelbrock. Somebody rubbed the white part out, and they didn't get the black out, the shadow. So he sent me a picture of that, and I could see where the E was and stuff. So I sent my rep for the area back, and they look at it. He called me and he says, Vic, I think this is your car. And he says, it's not in real bad shape. And we sold it to somebody in state of Washington that still had Washington plates on it, and he obviously drove it for a while and then sold it to the guy back in Long Island. So we got it back, and then we went to a man by the name of Julius. He's in the valley here in the LA area, and he does nothing but Chrysler cars. And he gave me a price, and I said, Julius, I'm not going to ding it because it doesn't have the right nut and bolt in it or whatever. He says, Vic, I only do them one way. So I said, you got it. So about a year, he came back with it, and it's just absolutely brand new. It's better than it ever was when it was new, and so it's really great to get something like that back. And so it'll be in our barn forever.
Well, thank you for bringing it to the Concours today.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I'm here with David Conforti. He's the general manager here at Trump National Golf Club. This is quite a turnout, and your staff, they're going over and above.
Well, thank you, and all the kudos go to the staff and to the volunteers and the staff for the Concours. They're the ones who really make this happen.
Well, the view too here. To be here every day and see this.
It's nice to hear because I've been here over 4 years now, and sometimes I take it a little bit for granted. Not that it isn't any less beautiful as the first day I started. The day is just perfect. For those who were here at 6 in the morning, they could attest that from the clubhouse, you couldn't see the park. No. So the day has opened up beautifully, and the temperature is perfect. I can't imagine a nicer day for the Concours.
Thank you, David. Thank you for joining us here at the 18th Annual Concours d'Elegance. I'm Betty Wheaton. See you next time.